So we were really into that kind of thing. But I definitely played against a lot of guys that spoke like this in tennis and soccer and things like that. Muffy and Buffy and hey, how are you? Good to see you. Totally know those guys, all right? Usually would fight those guys after school. But anyway, so now I didn't start the role of James. My very good friend Ted Lewis started that. And when Ted took a job being an actor on stage, after about, I think, the 8th episode, they asked me to imitate him. And in the beginning, the directors at the time were saying that Team Rocket was very legitimately straight bad guys. And I'm looking at Team Rocket and I said, are you sure that James isn't, these guys aren't like the comedy here? Like the funny? No, they want them listen to the original Japanese, listen to what they're doing, and imitate Ted. And of course, Ted is very funny. Ted is much funnier than I am. And they had it played very, very capped. So I said, all right, so I did it. And they're like, oh good, it sounds just like him. And then the next episode, I was in drag. And I was like, okay.
And so was James.
Well done. Yes, for the motivation. That's why I do voiceovers and don't do any on camera. But I channeled the great Edwin and any other like Mel Blanc kind of stuff. Ooh, Mr. Flintstone. That's what so the laugh of that's all that is. If the end of it would have been Mr. Flintstone, right? But I also, going back to the prep school thing, I was approaching, I pushed him in the envelope of, he is a Crane brother. It is Frasier, Niles, and James. So that's where I brought him, and the laugh just made sense. It's funny that became sort of the signature thing, and I mean, yeah, but I didn't invent it. I just was like, that's a funny thing from this actor who's done this kind of stuff. I'm going to incorporate that into this wacky little character. Plus, it makes his lower register kind of, I'm so full of myself voice into, I'm a girl, if he laughs like that, right? Yeah. But I'm glad you like the laugh.
Yes.
Bringing up Pokemon again with you, Dan, how did you feel when you got to play not only Professor Hale, but Entei in Pokemon 3000?
You were Professor Hale.
Well, he's clearly the father reflection that Entei sustains throughout the rest of the story.
You way more than I do.
I didn't have to say those lines.
Oh,
but that was such an exciting project for me, and I have never performed in a movie that people would want to see. And also, that was a bit earlier on in my relationship with 4 kids. So I felt very honored that they let me do that. And again, similar to the Mewtwo thing, it was a story anybody could relate to. You didn't have to know about Pokemon, right? Because we're talking about things that we all experience. Feeling alone, being young, not having the parent around at all, or at least as much as you would prefer. These are things that I grew up with. My father died when I was 4 and a half. So, that's why I said that, so you can be all specific. But the point I'm making is that it was gratifying to perform because I could find something compelling about it. That and it was clear that Hale is to what's the girl's name? I'm forgetting.
Molly.
Molly. That's right. But that to her, Entei was a form of participation with the father she's missing, right? I mean, I think that was pretty clear the way they structured it. So while Entei is a little bit more enigmatic and a little bit more elite sounding, there should be some recognizable qualities, right? So I felt it would have been inappropriate if they had directed me, no, we want this character to sound completely different than what you're doing. No, the point is the audience gets the link right away, and we're supporting that connection. But it was very gratifying. It was very gratifying. Yes.
Hey, I apologize for bringing this up, and I forgot to do this during the outback session, but I'm actually shooting a review for the Pyramid of Light movie, and I do have a 1-page transcript, and I was wondering if you guys would like to help provide the voices.
I'm not sure that I understand what you're asking.
So you want us to record something for your podcast?
No, it's just for a video review that I'm working on.
Oh, can we do that after the Q&A?
Well, sure, we can do that.
Yeah, let's do that after the Q&A. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to like the very first episode of Pokemon, like in season 1,
Yeah.
Do you think that Ash will ever find Misty and Mike?
Oh, right. It's so, here's the thing that I really wish would happen. I really wish the people that made the show actually listened to what the fans were asking to happen and just do it. Like all of that
You're
stuff.
sick of this question.
Well, no, it's like all of that stuff. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? I worked on a ridiculous show called Ultimate Muscle, which Dan also did some voice on. And the reason that show became such a crazy, wacky show, if you're not familiar with it, it's a wrestling show where the wrestlers are like ridiculous characters. Some of them, towards the second season, were things like Mr. Cheeks, who has a butt for a head. There's a guy that his head pops out of a toilet while he, and why? Because the creators took suggestions from the fans on what the wrestlers should be. Who watches a wrestling show? Probably a bunch of teenage boys. I want to see more butts and a toilet head. All right, let's draw that. Right? So, like for here, like it's like I think Ash should replace Misty's bike once and for all. The people at Pokemon should go like, we need to draw that. We need to do the bike episode. Why haven't we readdressed the bike? That's what they should do. They had Brock open his eyes. Remember when Brock opened his eyes? How many of you had nightmares? I did when I had to dub it. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, you can YouTube it. He opened his eyes once, and they're bigger than anyone's eyes in any anime ever. How he keeps them trapped in there. I think they stitch his eyes shut because
Notice that he's actually squeezing all the time.
Pow! And hit somebody else in the face.
Ocular retentive.
Yeah, so you think he's cooking rice balls? No, they're his eye. All right, next question. Yes.
Rob ever get a girlfriend?
I don't. First of all,
We've had this question.
he cooks. He's a nice guy. All that sort of stuff. Well, that's another thing. The fans need to write in and say Brock needs a girlfriend. There you go. I don't know.
So who we haven't heard from?
Yeah. Who's?
You in the back.
How'd you guys get into voice acting?
Oh.
I mugged somebody. I knew a friend of mine had got into directing some dubbing, and at the time I was doing theater and some television stuff and on camera. And so he said, "Hey, here's some anime stuff." And I liked anime. I knew what it was. I loved animation or whatever. But it wasn't like top shelf stuff or even middle shelf stuff. So he's like, "Hey, you want to go do this?" And I was like, "No." And then he said, "We'll pay you." And I was like, "Well." And then he asked one more time. I was like, "Okay." And then I went and did a session. I had a great time. And that happened to be something that Central Park Media was doing, and their stuff was being recorded at Tosh Studios, which is also where the 4Kids stuff was being done. So because I participated in a very small thing, my voice got into the ears of producers and directors, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So like a lot of people who end up with a career from something, it was a dumb luck situation, right? And I just managed not to screw it up too much so far.
Good answer. Well, I was a musician first. I actually, during the summers, I taught tennis at a tennis club. And one of the members there owned a recording studio, and I needed a new assistant. And I wanted to work at a recording studio, so I took the job, not knowing that they primarily did only voiceovers for radio and TV commercials. I thought maybe there'd be some music in there, but not much. And I learned about that business from being a production assistant, casting director, producer, until I finally took over the studio after my boss retired and ran that for 10 years. So
I thought you went there with guns. You'd like to get over now?
Yeah, that too, yeah. That would be the Kaiba way. But I basically learned all about that, and then at that same time, pursuing the music stuff, I had the great opportunity of going out on the road with Ringo Starr. And so that year, I decided that I was going to pursue the voiceover stuff more because it would give me a job that I could do anywhere there was a microphone and not have to have a 9-to-5 job anymore. And so I contacted one of the agents that I had been working with as a casting person and said, "Hey, I've been doing some voiceover, filling in some stuff here and there. Clients have been using me for stuff. I'd like to do this so that I can not do my day job anymore." And they signed me, and that's how I sort of stumbled into it. I actually did the first promo for Pokemon I think it was 2 years before the show ever came here. I was hired by then to be 4Kids. They brought me in to audition for, it was a teaser, it was a trailer. It was like, coming soon, Pokemon. And there were 15 people in the room and nobody knew how to pronounce the word. I did a 2-hour session of that sentence because someone wanted to say Pokemon, wanted Pokemon. We said it every which way we could, and I walked out of that session going, what did I just do? And then years later, I was asked to audition for Pokemon. I didn't get any roles, by the way. I was not cast as Brock, and I was not cast as James, as I mentioned with my friend Ted. But they started recording the first actor for Brock and didn't like him, so he never aired. They called me the next day and said, you were our second choice. We love you, come on in. Ouch. So yeah, I kind of stumbled into it, but for me it makes a lot of sense because singing and voice acting are very much related.
Particularly the dubbing.
Yes, timing and also inflection is pitch. You know, do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? It's just changing the pitch, the inflection, and if you have an ear for singing, then that becomes easier. When someone says, can you go for that word, it doesn't mean louder, right? So it made sense to me, but I never thought when I was starting out looking for my career that I was going to be a voice actor. Someone asked me recently, since with the directing and the voice acting, you know, what do you prefer? The notoriety is great. As a voice actor, I get to meet you guys, and you give me such complimentary praise, which is very humbling. I mean, if I hear, you know, I grew up watching you, your voice of my childhood, things like that, it's very flattering. I mean, you know, I didn't ever think I would hear that, and I'm not ungrateful about that. But the directing side is much more satisfying to me. It's like being the chef. I take all the ingredients and I know what this final thing is going to taste like, and I can't wait to share it. So you don't know what goes on behind the scenes to make these shows, and the individual interaction with these actors, and pushing them and seeing that talent evolve. That to me is much more satisfying than the acting side. So there's how I got it.
I would mirror that.
Yeah. All right, what do we got? Who's got? Oh, on this, yes, you haven't asked a question yet.
From the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh to the very end, what in the character development, what did you feel was the most challenging character development role during that time?
You mean with my character Kaiba? I think it was always the same continuity thing for me from the beginning to the end. Is that fine line of being a rival and not a villain. We didn't necessarily know the final story. We don't, you know, we're given these series, sometimes it's like 10 episodes at a time, sometimes even less. So we don't know the full story arc ahead of time, unless we've watched the Japanese, and if they haven't aired it or we're changing the story, we as the actors, even the directors, don't necessarily know what's coming up, which is why Team Rocket was supposed to be serious. But I knew from the beginning that the secret to his character was, I push him to be the best. But I would never do anything to truly hurt him. And I would never do anything to truly be dishonest and mean. I do this because without someone to push him to be the best, he would never be the best. He would never do it. He would sit at home and just go, great. There's no one to duel. So I tried to find a way to egg him on without being a villain. Because there are many villains in those shows. And there's many sarcastic characters in those shows that you know are evil. I don't think anyone would ever say that Kaiba was evil. They would say he's a jerk, but they'd also say he's cool. And he is also honorable on many levels. You know, the competitive side is what pushes Yugi. So that's the challenge from day one all the way to the end of the series, was maintaining that. And if the script hinted otherwise, we had to address that, because that's not something that Kaiba would do. So that, for me, that's the main thing.
Do you want me to say that? Oh, okay. So I think now you were asking about the arc throughout the series, from beginning to end. So I think the most challenging thing for most of that series, with the characters of Yugi and Yami, was to find why the relationship was relevant to those characters. What was their friendship about? How did they balance each other out? How did they contribute to each other's growth and maturation, right? If characters are, you want your characters to kind of be the same from episode to episode, so you know reliably you can tap into that thing that you like as the audience, right? But if they're too static, then they can become kind of one note or boring or whatever. And so it was an understanding that they had to have relevance to each other, and also how does that develop? And how much is that being reflected in this story or this line or this situation? Where do you have the opportunity to insert those other values that human beings have that may not be the focus of the new car they want to introduce in that episode, right? And so finding, and I think between those two characters, the innocence of Yugi, the openness, the good-heartedness, the compassion of Yugi, helps the Pharaoh with his rage and his solemn duty and this burden that he carries of being the master, right? Being the best, being the best. So, now, but what Yugi needs help with is confidence and a feeling of worth. Not that he's unloved, but he's young, right? It's not that he's psychologically insecure, he's inexperienced, right? And he's the shortest guy in the show, right? I mean, and that's intended to reflect his vulnerability and how far he has to grow, almost literally. So, and it's Pharaoh's strength and assertion, but also kind of reflecting back to another father-son dynamic. It's Yami's confidence in Yugi that creates the seeds, that plants the seeds of Yugi's confidence in himself, right? You feel affirmed when someone who you respects you back, right? So that's the nature of that.
And I think we also, I just want to, and not just because he's sitting here, but the fact that Dan was able to play two personalities bonded together, not just in the voice, because I know a lot of the fans, when they haven't met Dan, have said, I didn't realize he played both Yugi and Yami. Wait, the same actor played Yugi and Yami? Is that their personalities were so defined that when you watch that show, not knowing when you, of course, we hope that you watch those shows not thinking it's Eric Stuart doing the voice of and it's Dan Green doing the voice of, but you're listening to Yugi and Yami speaking with Kaiba, is that I would be pulled into, this is a conversation between two different entities. They're not voiced by the same person. That's a very difficult thing. And as a director, I can tell you that that wasn't hard for me to get out of him, but to master that is not easy. I mean, look, I play Brock and James. They're completely different. They're different vocal registers. They're not of the same heart, the same split mind. These two characters needed to be related, but they also needed to be individual. So that is not an easy task. So I think that that's something that you got to commend Dan Green for. All right, who hasn't asked a question? Yes.
What voice actors do you guys
Hate what? Dan Green.
Yeah.
No, what?
Too.
Yeah.
look up to or take inspiration from?
My biggest inspiration growing up was Casey Kasem. Probably because even in 5th grade I can imitate him. And Mel Blanc, things like that. I loved the fact that, people that can impersonate people like that, I just thought were great. I mean, Bugs Bunny stuff to me, that's my childhood. But yeah, later on in life I got to work with some of those people, because they were a lot of the New York DJ guys. I grew up listening to a lot of radio. But yeah, I would have to say it's Mel Blanc and it's Casey.
That's Peppa Pig, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did so many of the Warner movies. Mel Blanc was truly a genius, a cultural treasure, and anybody who's reviewed his work would agree to that. And certainly, yeah, who doesn't have Bugs Bunny in their ear? Well,
yeah. People
of our generation.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And did you want me to respond to that as well? Yeah. You just said you didn't expect to be a voice actor. and neither did I. And when I got into acting, I have a degree and all that stuff, and I'm classically trained.
Hey, that was a funny voice. I might be able to use that in something.
Really? So it's work. My desire to pursue acting was not so that I could be praised as an actor. It was so that I could enjoy being those characters, right? And I still don't really crave attention in that way, right? So I would be impressed by characters more so than the voice that was doing them, or at least that's what I was thinking. And I am a huge Spider-Man fan. And what was being rerun when I would come home after school? Okay, I was playing hooky. There's the 1960s Batman, or I'm sorry, Spider-Man. You all know the theme of Spider-Man, Spider-Man. So that was that show, and so I really latched on to that. And now having had the experience of Yu-Gi-Oh, I find it amusing, and I'm probably the only one, but I'll bore you with it anyway. In that rendition of Spider-Man in animation, he had a different voice as Peter Parker than he did as Spider-Man, and the Spider-Man was more manly and that sort of thing. Not very different than what they had done with Clark Kent Superman in the radio show, right? And that same voice actor from the radio show they used in the cartoons for a long time. But anyway, but I think it would be inappropriate for you to walk away with the idea that, yeah, Dan Green listened to that cartoon and that's what inspired him to beat Yu-Gi-Oh! That was not the path. That was not the path, right? Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
All right, who has not asked a question yet? In the pink hat.
Is it like, after you've worked with a character for like a long time, is it easy to like move away from that character?
You mean, do we miss being that character?
I mean, like, yeah, it's not like in a sense, like, like for Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, etc. So it's kind of easy to get away from that.
Do you mean, like if we're doing another thing, can we not go to that voice, or?
No, I understand you can return to it, but I'm just saying, like, is it easy, like, after the series ended, or?
So the word is not really easy. You're saying, do we forget how to do it?
No, not to forget. Is it easy to move away from that character? Like, is it easy to, not think about being that character?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I haven't voiced Brock and James for 10 years, but I am Brock and James. I mean, I have Brock and James action figures on my studio desk with Kaiba on my desk. Like, the years I was playing those characters, and now that I'm playing, we're doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, like, the versions of those characters, I'm definitely connected to them. Any character I have played, I have given it Eric Stewart's soul. As silly as it might sound, I feel like I put my stamp on it. Even when I had to come in and start imitating someone in the beginning, I then evolved it into something that I feel is my unique stamp on it. So I don't move away from those voices. I mean, I don't, it's sad to not dub them anymore, and it was very exciting to come back and play Kaiba again. But walking into that booth, and from the first, someone said, "Did you forget how to do the voice?" I'm like, forget how to do the voice? I do the voice every day. And it's like, well, what do you mean forget it, you don't forget it. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to be able to play these characters forever. Am I blessed that I got to play Pokemon for, 10 years and 8 movies and all of that? And yeah, that's pretty amazing. I worked on 2 of the most popular animes of all time. I never thought that would happen. So it's always sad to leave those behind. But, thank you. But yeah. As long as you guys continue to enjoy the work that I'm part of, that's cool to me. I consider us the Shatner version of Star Trek.
The old school.
Yeah, right?
Did you want me to respond to that as well?
Yes.
Well, and I think maybe a wrinkle in what you were asking was, is it hard to break away from that character that you've been in for so long? Maybe those habits are perhaps an overly familiar thing you resort to when maybe you're trying to do something else. And that can happen. And another thing that happens, those of you who are exploring acting, go, do, but also do full-on acting. Don't just keep it in your voice. Try it out for like the whole body experience. Maybe do some theater, just saying. Anyway, but another thing that happens to you, if you start getting work, people start looking to you for the values that you have contributed before. I had never done anything like the Pharaoh previously, but so I was like, oh, okay, so now I'm going to be more like majestic-y and big and grand and boop, boop, boop. And half the time I'm like, how would Patrick Stewart do this in an American dialect? Not that I approach him at all. But so then you've heard of typecasting and getting sort of pigeonholed, and so that can become a part of it too, you know. And especially if you do something that people like, you're like, I like that, right? What can be aggravating, and this happened to me more than once.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
okay, Dan. So we want you to do this role. Now we don't want to sound like Yu-Gi-Oh. Okay, we don't want you to sound like Vera, but we want you to be manly and commanding and kind of regal sounding. Can you do that and not sound like Yu-Gi-Oh? No, I can't do that and not sound like Yu-Gi-Oh because those are basically his properties. But anyway, but also that's a really fun thing that happens for you when you do characters and more characters and more characters. You discover things about yourself. You add to your own dimension, your own personality. You allow yourself to embrace certain things, put them out in the world, and you grow internally from what you do externally, which is amazing. And so now you have, I know I can do that kind of character, and I can do this kind of character. And those lead to paths to other characters that you get to encounter.
And it also requires, you know, sometimes, I mean, and Dan knows this, there were shows that we were working on where I want to work with a talented actor like Dan, but I also know that the producers are going to think he does this one thing that he does so well. So having the open-minded approach to this stuff of saying, okay, well, where can we use this talent that's not in the expected character? On Ultimate Muscle, we see let's do a British accent, and I directed a very funny show called Viva Pinata. But if you haven't, if you played the video game, I'm sorry, but if you've watched the show, you know what I'm talking about. They are 11-minute episodes about nothing. They are hilarious. And Dan plays Hudson Horstachio, which is one of the funniest, very sort of Kelsey Grammer-esque characters. Hilarious, but hilarious. And what was great was those in the production world that we were working in, and yes, if you do something really well, and that's what's giving you work, it's great until they realize we can't use you again because you've already exhausted that on every other role, right? You are famous for that style, sorry, can't use you for this. So that's the kiss of death. So with this particular show, you get to test someone's humor. They didn't necessarily know that Dan was very funny. This is not I Love Dan now.
That's okay, that's okay.